It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, June 5th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is apparently going outside again next year, Russ.
Yep, I love it.
I love it too. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the hockey ops changes, plus the state of the NHL info from Gary Bettman, plus our Nemesis of the week, all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology, and also coming to us from Las Vegas, where he is covering the Stanley Cup Final. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we talked last week about the potential or unofficial changes to the Flyers hockey ops department. It feels like the Flyers were maybe rushed into the official announcement by some of the news leaking, but nonetheless, they did do that over the weekend. And so we found out for sure that Alyn Macaulay is going to be an AGM in charge of the Phantoms, as well as some player development stuff and otherwise under his purveyance. Riley Armstrong is director of player development now. And one piece of information that was new to us from that previous information is that Nick Schultz is assistant director of player development now. And then they officially said that Mike O'Connell, John Riley, and Kjell Samuelsson will not be returning. The little caveat there, we had thought maybe Kjell Samuelsson would have a different role within the organization, but that seems like it's not happening. So a lot of moving pieces and parts here, but a lot of people sticking around.
Yeah, it's a shame about Kjell. I really do think he has a lot to offer, but that's their decision. They've hired their staff now. Now we'll kind of see what they can do and see if they change some things and add some new wrinkles.
Yeah, I am intrigued by the Nick Schultz news here because we knew he had been part of the player development group since he retired from playing, but we hadn't really heard much from him other than little comments here and there at development camp. But he hasn't been a real public figure for the Flyers.
No.
And with this promotion and with Riley Armstrong, now the director of player development, I'm wondering how much we'll hear from these two.
Well, I mean, we'll hear a lot during rookie camp and development camp. So that's where I expect to hear from him. So that's when, I'll draw some conclusions and kind of, pick his brain and kind of see where he's at. So I think that's when he'll get to show us.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a wait and see with those two in terms of what their strategy is, what kind of approach they're going to be taking, and you're right, at development camp and at rookie camp, that's where we're gonna get the most information. So just gonna wait and see, and hopefully we'll get some good things from those two.
Yep, we'll take the patient approach here.
Yep. And then the other big news of the weekend coming out of Las Vegas, Gary Bettman obviously always does sort of a State of the Union address about the NHL before the first game of the Stanley Cup Finals. And as part of that, officially announced the full slate of special events for the NHL for next season, including the Stadium Series announcement, which we had talked about previously. There had been information about that, and it had also been hinted at the announcement of Keith Jones and Danny Briere's hires that there would be an outdoor game in the Flyers' future. And sure enough, we are going to have that back-to-back Stadium Series game, February 17th to 18th at MetLife Stadium in North Jersey. home of the New York Football Giants and New York Jets. And the Flyers versus Devils game will be the first of those two games on the 17th. On the 18th, it'll be Isles versus Rangers. I am a lot more excited about this than I thought I would be. And we'll get to the than I thought it would be part in the Nemesis discussion later in the show. But I think this is a really creative idea from the league.
No, it is. It's a creative idea. I like it. I've been to MetLife many times as a Jets fan, so have good experiences there. I do understand, though, that not every Flyers fan is happy about this because, again, this is something in their eyes that might cost them more money for watching a team that maybe they don't love at the moment. So there is that too, and we have to point that out because I've heard that.
Yeah, I think, obviously when you're in a marquee event like this, you want your team to be able to put their best foot forward, right? And the Flyers are not expected to be a good team. Now, stranger things have happened. We'll see how the season plays out in terms of how competitive they are versus the New Jersey Devils, who are obviously expected to go into next season in a really good position based on the steps that they have taken this season forward and the talent that they have on that team. And it just seems like, to spend that kind of money and travel up to the stadium and everything around it for what could potentially be a lopsided competition, it's a tough pill to swallow for some.
It is. What my advice is spend the money if you're going there to sort of watch a celebration of hockey, be out there, have some fun, have some beer. Then I think you're okay. If you're going to take it real serious, and I get it.
Yeah, I am actually really intrigued to see if they take advantage of the American Dream Mall right nearby that has an indoor rink. That's where the Metropolitan Riveters of the PHF played their games this past season. There's an indoor ski hill there. There's
Nobody
shopping.
talks about that place, though.
I know, but they don't. But I'm just wondering, given the proximity and the fact that there's two games being played at MetLife, if they take advantage of it and try to have some other events at the mall or, in that general vicinity.
I mean, if I was the governor, I would. I would be like, we got to get some business here. What's going on?
Yeah, just have some public skates at the rink there tied to the Stadium Series and all of that. I think it could be a lot of fun. All right, moving over to the Memorial Cup, where we had been tracking Flyers prospects J.R. Avon and Brian Zanetti playing for the Peterborough Petes, who were the OHL champions going into the Memorial Cup. And Peterborough had a rough beginning to the tournament, but managed to squeak their way into a tiebreaker game to see who would be in the semifinals up against Kamloops. And that, first off, to have a tiebreaker game is unusual. Yep. But then to have that tiebreaker game go into overtime was even more. What a game. Honestly, I had so much fun watching that game. Both teams were just pushing on every front. And it was great. Brian Zanetti scored a goal in that game, which was really cool. He was the opening goal scorer for Peterborough in that one. And then J.R. Avon with the OT winner. It was such a good play that led to J.R.'s perfectly placed shot. So for Flyers fans, I think that was a fun game to watch and a good outcome.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's a couple of guys they have, and you'll see how they look in the future. But, to perform well in a big game, shows they have a little something.
Yeah, I think so too. Unfortunately, the Petes lost to Seattle in the semifinal in the next game, but
they're a juggernaut.
I know. Seattle's just so good with so many first-round picks from last year on that team. So, but I got to give some props to Peterborough. They battled until the very end. And again, I'm super excited, especially to see J.R. Avon at training camp this year and see what he can do.
Yeah, Peterborough had a really good year. This should be a good summer for both those guys, and we'll see them in camp.
Yeah. So given that you are in Las Vegas covering the Stanley Cup Final, what was your take on Game 1 being in the arena?
Yeah, the arena is great. I hadn't been there before. The atmosphere is terrific. The pregame is all fun.
Such a fun. Yeah, their pregame is one of the best in the league.
It might be the best. Montreal has a real good one too.
Yeah.
But this is just, spot on great. As far as the game went, I wasn't overly surprised. Both goalies played great. I mean, again, nobody talked about Aiden Hill all year, even through the playoffs until recent, because he was looked at as an average goalie, but he's just been unbelievable. He's out dueling Bob. I pointed out in an article on sportsology.com, he had a higher save percentage coming into that game, which you wouldn't think. It seems counterintuitive, but he did. And nobody showed any rust. But what did show was the fact that Vegas has better defense, and they were the harder checking team. And at some point, Florida just couldn't keep up with that. I pointed out that Gustav Forsling had 4 turnovers. He had three takeaways, but 4 turnovers is a lot. And for a guy who played 25 minutes. So that's their defense just doesn't have the same players, and the breadth
That's true.
Yeah, and the breadth of defending forwards that Vegas has is just too deep. You have Carlson, you have Eichel, you have Mark Stone. These guys are all
that
sharp.
Mark Stone goal was so good too.
Yeah, and Eichel had a nice steal to set up a really good scoring chance. I mean, they make plays like that, and when you have forwards that make plays like that, you're really dangerous. And this is something where I think Flyers fans should take note, because while John Tortorella is working on the overall team defense, you still need 3 to 5 really good 200-foot forwards, and they're very short of that right now.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, game 2 is tonight. We'll see how that one plays out in what should be a pretty exciting series. In the meantime, there was more information to come out of Gary Bettman's Stanley Cup Final, State of the NHL press conference, and we will get to what else he had to say coming up next.
For a championship team, it's all about making sure every play is a perfect fit. Every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
All right. So our draft coverage will be continuing this week, of course, leading up to the NHL draft later this month. Tomorrow, we're going to have Fargo Force Day, where we're going to look at a couple depth pick options for the Flyers coming from the Fargo Force in the USHL. Plus, later in the week, we're going to look at Oliver Moore and do an Oliver Moore versus Ryan Leonard comparison and see if both of those guys are available to the Flyers at 7, which we think is the right option to go with. So, Russ, you were there for Gary Bettman and Bill Daly's press conference. And, sometimes when you read about what they said or read quotes, it's hard to get a real picture about what they think or what the underlying tone was behind any statement they made. And since you were in the room, I'm just curious what you thought, kind of the overall attitude was and how people were feeling in the room about what they had to say.
Well, their attitude was they were going to answer everything. They're not afraid of anything, and they would deflect what they felt like deflecting. So, there's never a negative in a Gary Bettman press conference anymore in his eyes. And so when you do that, and he's really good at answering questions and turning things around and getting that positive message out, and that's his job, right? But there were plenty of groans. We could start with the Arizona Coyotes. You could start with the Diamond Group RSN stuff. There were some things that were glossed over and not answered right, and gone back to, and you just get what you get. That's it.
Yeah, I think, starting with the easy stuff for them to get through, presenting the special events for the
Yes.
next year. They revealed the logos for the Heritage Classic. We have which is in Edmonton next year. And then we have the Winter Classic in Seattle. And then, of course, the All-Star game, which will be in Toronto.
Now, Gary wasn't happy because I don't know the date of the Heritage Classic, but it said 2003 on the logo.
Oh, really?
And he mentioned that and he said, I'm going to have to talk to somebody about that.
Oh, yeah, that is a big error.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course they talked about the Stadium Series weekend, which is what we talked about earlier in the show, and then the salary cap question, which was kind of something we already knew about, that there was really only going to be about a $1 million bump for this upcoming year, so that would
Give
make
or
it
take, he said, because
give or take.
because of the way the cap is. But we should talk about that just for a second because I know there was this thought like it could be more.
Mhm.
But we never believed it on this show, and I never believed it, and so now you know for sure. And so now, if you're a GM, that now tells you, okay, things got a little harder because now
Yep.
I can't buy my way out of a situation necessarily with more money.
Yeah, and for Danny Briere, clearing cap space is going to become all the more important.
Yes.
So the cap next year should be about 83.5 million, but we'll get that officially once the season ends and everything comes out in the wash in terms of the hockey related revenue. So, looking at a couple of other issues, they were asked specifically about the Arizona situation, which you mentioned, and they were asked to defend Arizona as a viable place for an NHL team, which I thought was interesting, the way they went about answering it.
It was interesting. It was a really good question because I feel like the room didn't feel like the first answer was significant enough. And honestly, even that one wasn't. To say it's a great market, that's an over exaggeration. Now, if you want to say it's a good TV market and all the other things, you want to say they have good fans, sure, I'll buy in on that. But it's not a great market. If it were a great market, they'd have a deal. They focused back on the Phoenix area. And again, I've seen the articles, I've seen the lists. They literally have 3 months, maybe 4, to pull off a deal. Otherwise, we're talking what we're going to talk about, where they're going to move to. And so my whole thing is they're acting like they've had all these other opportunities, but chose Tempe. And it didn't seem like that on the landscape. So we'll see.
No, it seemed like this Tempe thing, and for how long they've been talking about it and how the development process went before the vote, that was like well over a year of discussions. And so to compress all of that into a 3 to 4 month timeline for another location seems like a very difficult hurdle to overcome, to be
It
generous.
does. No, it does.
And so you alluded to this, but they were asked specifically about the offer from Salt Lake City and Ryan Smith, who owns part of the Utah Jazz, and they confirmed that they have been approached by this group in Salt Lake City as a potential relocation spot. But I think they're gonna fight this Arizona thing to the bitter end, and I honestly hope the Coyotes stay in Arizona. I think that it's always a sad thing when a team leaves a market, but ultimately they got to have some stability because they've been struggling to make this team viable and competitive and just haven't found a way to do it there. And maybe a clean slate is the best option.
Yeah, I get that fans won't want to see it leave, but you can't keep playing out of college. It's a
Yeah.
horrible look. It's embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. And the league knows it, and we know it, and the other owners know it because they're not making the kind of money off of that franchise that the rest of them pull in. Not even close.
No.
So that's really the issue there, and we'll see where that takes it.
Yeah. Expansion, not a priority right now, which makes sense, but they are doing like work to make sure that if they want to pull the trigger, they can have the process go quickly and efficiently so they know where the interest groups lie, which I think is a
Yes.
smart way to look at it.
Yeah, Bill Daly's really good with all that stuff, and there's no doubt
Yep.
they're prepared. And right now they're riding the wave of gambling revenue, right? So if that starts to slow down, then look for expansion, Rachel. That's just the way the financial part of this game works.
Gotta infuse those millions and millions of dollars, or billions, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, they might be at 6 billion this year. They think.
They think. Also, just a couple smaller things. They're still in negotiations with the Players Association about a World Cup of Hockey, but the discussions are continuing. I think it would be great if it happened, but I think this is kind of a slow discussion, and it'll take a while to iron out everything.
Yeah, and Marty was in the back of the room listening to everything. So that's always fun when you got the new guy there.
Yeah.
But there was, I felt like a big thing that was glossed over with the RSN deal with, I guess they're now called the Diamond Group, right? Or Diamond, whatever they are. Now, Gary Bettman made it a point to say, hey, in market, those fans don't have to worry. They'll be able to watch their team. And sure, I believe that that's the case because I believe the NHL will step in if something happens and make sure the games are shown. But they're not going to make money off of them, maybe a little bit of advertising. And what was glossed over was they were asked about the financial implications of it. And all they would say is they haven't heard anything yet that makes them seem like it wouldn't be. But we're seeing reports that when this goes through bankruptcy court, the NHL is like fourth in line as far as the other sports and the priority of getting some money to them, the pennies on the dollar stuff. So there is going to be a loss here. And at some point, the league will talk about that. But right now, they don't want to.
Yeah, and it is interesting, like, who owns the risk for those deals, in terms of the ownership across the league versus, the Players Association, and how that balances out escrow and all of that moving forward. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and we should mention that even though the cap is going up, there's still escrow too.
Yep, there is. Also, the Stanley Cup will once again not be going to Russia on a summer tour for any players that may be getting their day with the cup.
Which you feel bad about, but like they'll just
Yeah.
have to come here and celebrate. So it's fine.
So I think the biggest sort of controversial part of the whole presser was talking about reinstating controversial figures in hockey. I thought it was very bizarre that Valerie Nichushkin is just now eligible to play next year, that the Avalanche handled it and the league wasn't going to really look into it, which is, I just thought, quite bizarre.
Yeah, the best thing I could say after seeing what's available online and everything else is the NHL is just taking the police and the Avalanche's word for it. Say what you will on that, but they're not going to look into it any further, like you said.
Yeah, and then of course, Stan Bowman and Joel Quenneville from the formerly of the Chicago Blackhawks have requested meetings to get reinstated. They said that should those meetings occur, which means yes, those meetings will occur.
They're happening.
They're going to happen after the Stanley Cup Final is over. Which, for anybody that wants to potentially hire them, they're going to have to wait a little while. I personally wouldn't hire them at this moment. There have not
Somebody's
been
going
enough.
to, Rachel,
I know. I just think that they individually, while they've sort of been quote unquote punished by not being in the league for 1 year only for causing tremendous harm to one of their own players, I think that some more time and some more, evidence that they accept responsibility for what they have done might be something of value, I think, in these meetings.
The only thing I could say is I think you'd be surprised at maybe some of the work that is being done by them behind the scenes. So it's not really being reported.
Yeah. I mean, show me then. Happy to hear about it. Just show me before you make a unilateral decision.
It might happen.
Yep. And then we'll find out after the Stanley Cup as well about what happened with the 2018 Team Canada investigation. So that is another to be continued.
It's dragging. Like they finished.
I don't understand. They're done. Like, what's the thing? What's going on here?
Well, I think what it is just they're trying to elongate the process so that everybody just kind of, gets numb to it and just it loses its sting because they already have the report done. And then it's like, hey, we'll look at it during the summer and then we'll decide what to do. It's like, the report's done. Like you could look at it on the off day for the Stanley Cup if you really wanted to. So to me, that tells me that they're just keeping the process slow.
Yeah. All right. Well, lots to keep an eye on as the summer continues. In the meantime, it's Monday. And of course, we will be talking about our nemesis of the week. And we will do that coming up next. So each and every Monday on Locked On Flyers, Russ and I look around at the world of hockey and the Flyers and say, what is bothering us the most? What is scaring us the most? And name our nemesis of the week. And last week, we talked a little bit about the wait for the Stanley Cup Final and how, because of how the series went and the timing, Florida had to wait a week and a half between games. And so the anticipation was high. It's happening. We're here now. Russ is in Vegas. So that part of it is good. I think for me, the nemesis this week relates to the outdoor game announcement. And I stand by everything I said earlier that I'm really excited about it. I think the whole concept of the weekend is really cool. I also do obviously stand by saying, I wish maybe the Flyers would be a better team to present in a marquee event like this. But all of that being said, just this little nagging thing in the back of my brain says, I really didn't want another outdoor game until they could figure out the logistics to have it at Penn State. I just really think the Flyers fandom and the Pens fandom for that matter, like getting a Flyers Pens outdoor game at Penn State is like the penultimate contest in NHL All-Star or outdoor games, right? And to not have that be the next one in the queue, just like, it just burns a little bit.
I was told by, a few sources it will never happen. And it'll never happen because of what happened at the big house, because there's one road in, one road out. They don't want to have that kind of traffic again. It was really bad at the big house. Like there were people sitting in traffic for 3 hours. And that's what would happen with Penn State too. And it's just not going to happen.
Listen, a girl can dream, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. Yep. And like, I didn't even go to Penn State. And I think like, this is just like, how great would it be?
Well, when everybody can teleport there or have a hovercraft, then maybe that'll work.
Fair enough.
So my nemesis is, as I'm here in Las Vegas, first thing is, they used to always talk about the buffets, right? I think now the price of the buffets are priced out. Now, I don't know every buffet in town, but at the hotel I'm staying at, it's $31.99.
Yikes.
And that's
even if for a lunch buffet or a dinner buffet?
I think it's lunch. I think it's maybe, I didn't see the Sunday brunch price I think was a little higher. Might be like 35. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking, you're pricing the average person out of that. And so, so that's one thing. The other thing is, we have all these other companies that come here and serve food and same places you have at home, but I'm hearing complaints like it's not exactly the way it is at home. And I could tell you as an example, like Einstein Bagels, like, look, I'm looking for a bagel. There's no great bagel in Vegas.
No,
I get it, right?
That is true. I have been there and I know.
Yeah. And so Einstein's okay. It's a palatable enough where I can get through it. But I got to tell you, it's not exactly the same as far as what you can get on the East Coast. Like as an example, there's like 2 or 3 cream cheeses. You can't get like, I don't know, a lock spread or whatever. They just don't have it. So what I have found is in a few of these chains that are here is they sort of get Midwesternized and I don't like that. So like as an example, I walked by the New York pizza place. It didn't smell like New York pizza. It wasn't looking like New York pizza. I went and I peeked into the Jewish deli. Like I'm telling you, the only 3 things that were remotely really Jewish on that Jewish deli were matzo ball soup and a Reuben and like brisket. But did it have the smell of a Jewish deli? No. Did the bread look like it would look in a Jewish deli? No. So these are the things that they all say that, hey, it's New York, but it's here in Vegas. It's not New York. It's just the way it is.
I will tell you the trick to that is in Las Vegas, because I've been there quite a bit, especially when I used to live in Utah. I was down in Vegas a lot. And I have a dear friend that lives there who is also Jewish, and living sort of in the outskirts, like on the north end of the city, there's plenty of good places to go for, like, that locals go to.
Okay.
Anywhere near the strip, no, it's just not good. But if you get into like where people actually live their lives, in
Okay,
the
that's
Vegas
where the stuff
area,
is. Okay.
that's where the good stuff is. I
Okay, that makes sense
promise you.
because I'm only encountering the strip stuff this trip. So.
Yeah. All
Okay.
right.
Fair enough.
That will do it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we are going to get into those Fargo Force prospects, and really excited to talk about that. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So send in your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. We'll have that mailbag segment on Wednesday. I am Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.